Okay.
Well,
So we want to come in here and we want to find out. We want to disconnect our armature and our field wire. So we've just got those two wires out here.
so armature, another name for armature is battery, and that's the field. Oh no,
Armature's the
I
one
take that
that's
back.
back in the
Armature's
back.
the one on the back.
Yeah, the one that we were talking about. We couldn't get two. We want to
Yeah.
we want to separate it because we want to work without the regulator, without the battery. Although we're going to cheat and use the battery to give some field later on, but we want to just work with the generator
Okay,
to
let's
start
get
with.
this cover off, and we had probably better disconnect the battery before we
Sure.
get down in there. We don't want the magic
So
smoke
I
coming
guess
out.
we need, since I'm in the shop here, what do we need? Screwdriver of,
A straight blade screwdriver is all we need, which I have one in the trunk if I...
we'll go ahead and get one from here. Well, we're going to want to pull the regulator off to look at it anyway.
Well,
Because once we figure out the generator, then we're going to be looking to figure out the regulator without hooking it up to start with. See what we got.
so to do a generator test, to see if it's outputting, you still need to,
We need to have a load.
you need to feed it some
Yes.
power to the field coils, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we need to feed it power, and we also need to have something to power off of the armature coming out.
And to figure out how to repolarize it, we need to know what kind it is, because it's a different method.
Yeah, we need to find out if we are needing to ground the field to make a current, or whether we need to,
Or jumper it.
or jumper it. So we'll start out with a ohm meter.
And so, yeah, so we can tell that is what you're saying. We can figure that out.
We should be able to.
Without, well, I mean, for me to tell, I would have to take the the generator apart and see where things are inside there. It's kind of why I haven't done it. So on this cover, it says that it works for positive or negative ground. So I did a Google search on positive or negative ground regulators, and I found this regulator.
Oh, cool.
Some company that we never heard of.
Did you print out the information for us?
I didn't print it, but I probably should have.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried searching it. I didn't find it. And
You want to take the field off or the battery off? We got the armature off the back.
I want the field.
That's this one. That's the field.
But if it's all wrapped up in a harness where it's just easier to, we might as well just pull them both, really.
Okay.
Because we're going to want to have the regulator out on the bench where we can look at it.
Well, let's do it.
Sounded good. Turning over, it sounded real good.
He converted it to 12 volt while he was at it. The end plate was broken, so he changed that also.
Oh, well, got more wires hooking down there.
You know, I wonder if we should mark those so we don't lose track of which one's which.
Well,
Like a little piece of tape or something.
that would be good to know. But let's just for kicks here too. Okay, the one that said battery is battery. Okay, let's see.
I see there's one sneaking out the bottom there too. I suspect that goes to the ignition, but I'm not sure.
So this was the armature back on there. Okay. Okay. So we got
You gotta tell us what you're doing.
we
Trying
are
to learn here.
We're checking ohms. We got 25 ohms to ground. And to our armature, we have got 14 ohms. So I would think that this would be a 3 brush because we're closer. So if this is a 3 brush, we're further, yeah, if it's a 3 brush, then that would mean instead of where we had polarized this one with jumping it to the battery, it should actually be grounded and temporarily polarized by hitting the armature, which will then send some through there. But what I,
So the field goes to the third brush, right?
yeah,
So you check the resistance to the field and also to compare it between that one and the other one, which would be the battery, I guess, the output.
yeah, it would be the output.
So there was more
If-
resistance.
Yeah, if I'm thinking right, and we could,
Okay.
you know,
I'm just trying to follow your thinking there.
yeah, I've got 25 ohms going to ground
From
the
field.
from the field. Okay,
that,
wait,
that
yeah,
was field.
right, from the field. I've got 25 ohms, so it's not close to ground, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And this one here is still connected, so it's not like it's totally isolated from the power. We have 14.6 ohms there. If it was connected directly to the armature, then we would have no ohms in between them. There'd be no
Okay.
resistance in between them.
Okay, so that's pointing to a third brush.
Yeah,
You know, if we took this band off, we might be able to see brushes.
yeah, and I think that's good too. Check it.
We'll take a peek.
Yep. Oops. Hello, Bob. So Bob, 15-mile machine.
Yeah.
Do you mind being on YouTube?
Why, are you making YouTube right now?
Yeah.
If it's for any good reason, what can I do for input?
You could just say that you're a competing machine shop down the road,
I'm a,
but we collaborate a
I'm a
lot.
competing, collaborating machine shop that relies on the knowledge of my friend John at Howie's Machine, who's a super guy in so many fields.
So what do we see?
Well, we see a brush right here. We see another brush right back there. And maybe there's another brush on the far side or on the bottom. I don't know.
Brush there. The spacing is what would tell us more than anything. And then, well, of course, we can
Brush right here. Is there another brush? Or?
see where do these wires go to. I mean, can we see where the wires itself?
Well,
2 wires.
that's questionable if we're going to be able to see that.
But
You might have a little mirror.
That's the first that I've seen in turbines like this.
37 Ford. There's not very many of them.
Yeah, I'll bet.
we can, we should have 0 resistance if we're on the brush that it's on. So let's start out with our armature. And the armature, oops. Okay, we got 32 ohms. So that one's not to the armature. I can't see over there yet. Pick a brush. Pick a brush, any brush. Okay, that says we got 11-ish ohms. Go way on down to the far side.
Is there a third brush on there? I think so.
I think third brush is on the top. Okay, that is the armature output brush over there. So this one is probably going to ground. We'll probably check this one and we'll find it. dead on ground on this one. Yep,
Yep.
that one's grounded. So this is our third brush. Now,
Hot dog.
one of the questions is it adjustable? Just for kicks. We would think that it's probably adjusted right, but if it was originally a 12-volt frame, it may not be adjustable. It would have been late enough that they'd have just picked a maximum point, and that's where it was built.
I gotta tell you, it does not look adjustable from here.
Yeah.
It looks like it's anchored.
Well, you'd be moving.
I think this is the hinge for the spring.
Yeah, you'd be moving the plate that it's anchored to, is what you'd be doing.
But it's anchored to the same plate as,
Yeah.
wait a minute. No, it isn't.
And there'd be like a screw on the back here or something that
Maybe
would
there is a
allow
ring.
that plate
That
to
could be a
move.
ring that, it's possible.
Anyway, we know what we need to do. We know how we need to polarize it. Did that regulator say that it was supposed to run with a 3-brush system?
didn't say anything.
Didn't say anything. It just works with everything.
say a
It's
darn
wonderful.
thing.
Buy our regulator,
Yeah.
and it will work.
It was very, very minimal.
Okay. We know that what we need. We were polarizing it backwards. We know that.
Okay.
Now, the question is, we have a third brush here, and it is supposed to be, the lead that comes out of it is supposed to be getting ground to make it charge, right? It's supposed to be grounded to make it put out more charge. This field wire.
The field wire.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The field wire would be grounded to put out more power.
yeah. And
So
I don't
now-
know where that ground occurs. I
In the
mean,
regulator. Supposed to.
Okay.
But here's my point is, and we quickly polarized it to the battery, which was backwards.
Okay.
So now that we know what we're doing, the question is, how do we polarize it? How do we polarize it?
Well,
Because if we ground that, obviously nothing's going to happen.
So back to the book. You got internal grounded, external grounded, and they polarize differently. So we have not internal, external. We have a third brush.
Right.
We have. I don't know.
Yeah. It's the same thing, though. It's just for general. It's the same thing. We're trying to make a current across the generator. One of the ways that they do this, which leaves it to where you have no question as far as what you're doing, is they temporarily connect the generator when it's running up to a battery. So now the battery puts out, you would have to have that grounded at the time, and then the field would pick up from the fact that there was power going through the armature in the right place.
Okay.
Whether it works as a motor or not, you just have it turning so you're not burning it up.
Okay. Yeah.
And then that is one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is we can even real safely lift that third brush off since we see it there. We can put a piece of paper underneath it. It's insulated. Now we can ground this one and we can run a wire over and we can flash our field on where the third brush is because we're connected to the field at that point. But I would like to do that through a resistor so we're flashing it a little bit lighter, since it's normally getting some breakdown from coming through the generator there.
Okay.
The other thing we can do, which is kind of what I was wanting
You
to
want to add some resistance to emulate what it would have had. Is that what you're saying?
add some to make sure we're not, because it doesn't take that much polarizing. I just don't want to burn
Oh.
anything out.
Oh, okay.
So we're possibly giving it, and for all we know, this is built with a 6-volt field. Because the field for a 6-volt can work on a 12-volt too. They normally aren't the same, but they can be. We just give it less power through the regulator to put out the same strength of voltage.
Okay.
And the armature should be different, but to a certain point, you can kind of, some of this stuff, you can cheat it a little bit from one to another. And it comes down to the regulating. But we can hook that up direct. What I was wanting to do here, now that we know what we're trying to do, is I wanted to hook a light up to this and then feed it some field. And then from there, it's going to either take over or not. But I wanted to hook up a light onto the armature. I have a headlight here so that we could try and run a headlight with the armature.
Ah, okay.
And what we will do to get it to put out, we have the third brush. It might be a little bright for our light, but we're not concerned about the light. We'll just ground this. We'll just ground our third wire, our field. We'll ground it. So we ground the field,
So field to ground. Mm-hmm. Got ya.
field to ground,
Through the resistor or no?
just direct, because we're still picking up the other side of it off of the brushes.
Got ya.
And then what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily go with, we're going to hook up our light to it, and then we're going to temporarily take from the 12 volts, well, it's right there. We're going to temporarily put those two together while it's running.
Like, is that the
So we're then putting,
external resistor style, Delco Remy style? Probably doesn't matter.
no, yeah, that's
Okay.
that's a different thing.
Okay.
Because we've got battery terminal there and our armature terminal. And when we connect the two together, then your generator is either going to act as a motor or a generator, either one.
Right.
And if it acts as a motor, it doesn't really matter because we've just polarized at that point, because it got the current off of the third brush, brought it back to ground.
We'll watch it when it happens to see if it tries to turn.
What's that?
I was looking at the spring assembly configuration. It has a little bit of a spring action, doesn't it?
Have we mentioned to our people that this is a 37? And the difference between a 37? Because 37 has real bearings that a mechanic can work on. You can take them out, change them.
Insert bearings.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
36 had bearings too. I mean, they were Babbitt. You had to be a machinist or some other person to do those, or automotive mechanics in the old days were machinists. They really were.
And the 37 has the water pump down in the block instead of in the heads, which is quite an advantage also.
But this is a slightly newer engine. You've got the full 239 cubic inch. You got the long stroke.
No.
No.
No. It's bigger than the earlier ones, but it's not as big as the 8BA. It's the intermediate.
I actually had 3 of those that sat out here forever. I finally got to the point that I was giving them away, and I don't know if he did anything with them, but I gave them to Chris Hunter.
Ford flathead V8s?
Yes, yes. Not, they didn't turn over, but they were complete.
Were they the 59 AB or
Yes.
were they later 8BA?
They were the earlier one with the half of a bell housing on them,
Okay. Yeah.
but they were the Lincoln motors, basically,
Okay.
the 239s.
Yep.
I figured somebody had won them, and at first people were excited to come and, I want that for my hot rod, and they'd come out and look at, it doesn't turn over. I'm not asking much. And finally I just got so fed up with it, and Chris wanted to put it in a farm tractor.
Yeah.
He wanted to do the farm tractor conversion, and
Sure.
I don't know if he ever did anything with them, or if they just went to his house and stayed, or what happened. I really don't know.
So they were the 20 stud, not the 21 stud, not the 24 stud.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm kind of a novice at this, excuse the question, but how do the valves work with those flat heads like that?
Well, they're under here. The cam is down the middle, and they push on the valve. So it's just
So-
a valve in
There's
the
a
block.
So the head, how thick is the head? Just only what we're looking at here?
Yeah, and it doesn't have any valve train in it. It just has coolant going through it.
Yeah.
Did you ever take part of Briggs and Stratton, the old Briggs and Stratton?
Well, I'm
Lawnmower
not fresh in
engines?
my mind, yeah, I have.
Yeah, because those were flathead.
Oh, yeah.
Except they're not water cooled, they're air cooled.
yeah.
But they've got the 2 valves come up and then the lifter underneath.
So this is called a Ford, what, 283?
Flathead V8,
Flathead V8 Ford?
and there's the 221 cubic inch, and the later ones were.
I'll have to look that up.
And then there's an early one
So
which,
save the chrome, this is all an original configuration, is it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the motor it came with, but it's the motor it would have come with.
See.
And the guy I bought it from didn't know very much about it.
Yeah.
And
You part of the engine club down there?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. You go.
I bought it in Denver a year ago, and the guy had this battery disconnect, and he always disconnected the battery, and I don't think he knew his generator wasn't running. But it
So-
wouldn't, because he'd have to repolarize it every time, and he wasn't that kind of a guy. That's kind of,
That's what you're remembering?
well, it's been a
So we
long
just,
time.
yeah, go ahead and hook the battery. I'm unhooked right now. We don't care which polarity is.
See if you got anything.
That one's about that bright. That one's dimmer, so this is brighter. We want brighter. Okay,
Okay,
so,
brighter it is.
and so we're not having other problems. We'll bring up our little insulators.
Wow, I brought some test leads, but they're not as nice as this gadget. This is
I
pretty
bought
handy.
the first of these came from Napa. I don't know why that thing won't close now. That plastic, I guess, is too old. Huh, that's a shame. Okay. And then I bought some from Snap-on. And then I found out that you can also buy them on Amazon, and I bought more of them. And the Napa were actually the most expensive ones, except for the fact they were on sale, so they weren't. They would have been on regular price. But that could have changed by now too. Okay, so we want to hook these up to what is going to be our output. So we're going to hook one up to ground. And we're going to hook one up to our armature, which is right there. And then we are going to want to go temporarily from the armature to the battery once it's running. And then see if we get a light light.
To polarize it,
Yep,
repolarize
Yep.
it. Are you ready?
yep. So make her run and give us, you know, a high, pretty high idle. You know, bring us up a little ways.
You bet. You know what?
But
We're gonna have to rehook that battery up.
that would make sense, Jerry.
Oh, we're not gonna get squat.
Let me get her tight first so we don't burn her. Okay. We get a light now? Oh, I forgot to ground the field. I need a jumper cable. Yeah, get me another jumper cable. I forgot to ground the field here.
All right.
Yeah, if I don't ground that field, it ain't gonna do anything.
So are you getting power just off the battery to make the light go?
At that point I was, yeah, which
Yeah.
doesn't do what I need yet. Because we gotta go, field has got to be grounded for this to function. Okay, now throttle it up again and I'll flash it. Now it's working. Now your generator's putting out.
Yeah. Right on.
And
You think we could throw a voltmeter on there to see what it's doing?
it quit. Light quit. Oh, I wonder if I burned out my light with too much power.
They got really bright, yeah.
I'll bet I burnt the light out. I'll bet we're still putting out, but we burn out the light. I'm all caught up in this microphone thing. I'm wired. Let me get...
I hate it when that happens.
DC volts. Yeah, it says we're putting out a little bit. Rev it up a little bit, Jerry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. It's working. We just burned out our light bulb.
Right on.
So we can turn her off. Because now it puts out, without having to add to the battery, it puts out power. I no longer have a good spare bulb for one of my pickups, but that's okay.
It's not that hard to come up with a junkyard headlight.
That was a new one.
Oh,
It's the only one I knew where to get without pulling it out of something. That's okay. Now we want to look at your regulator and see what your regulator does, or see if we need to come up with a different type of regulator to do what we want to
see
do.
what this regulator
Now-
is not doing.
Now that we know, well, it might have never been polarized right,
I don't think it was.
you know?
And like I said, that guy I bought it from always disconnected the battery, so he left it sit without the
Yeah.
battery. So
Yeah, many times you see things like when they're put together and that little last detail, it just never did work. So then it could be 12 times with 6 owners that I bought another regulator, bought another, and then he said it worked on the bench, said it worked, you know.
yeah,
They might not have meant to go together. Let's see what happens. Let us see what happens. So, this one, you got the cover. It had labels on it too, but there's the field, battery, L, A. And how do we know for sure that the ground, that the, this is, yeah, because it says positive ground on the one. That was one thing I...
for negative ground, armature goes on the back.
Yeah, that was one that I forgot to do too. I wanted to see and make sure we were putting out the voltage in the right, but we had to be putting it out because we flashed it with off the battery. It had to be the right direction. Yeah, it has to be.
Because you could go backwards, right?
You could if you flashed it back, but we couldn't flash it backwards because we flashed the armature.
Right. And earlier you were talking about the field grounding through the regulator,
Yes.
which is probably this bad boy here.
Well, yeah, and that's something too. You know, if our firewall doesn't have a good ground, will also mess with us and all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the
But-
battery is bolted right to the firewall, not very
Right.
far from there.
Right, but it comes down to like paint under those studs.
The battery ground here on the firewall. But yeah, you're right.
We don't want paint under those studs.
Yeah, no, you're right.
We really want to take and
Well, if
sand.
you got a little sandpaper, I'll take care of that.
I think this would work. And it really doesn't look like it's fried, just eyeballing it. In fact, it really doesn't look like it's used for done much. Little bit of points wear on the field side on this one. I'm thinking that's because it's been polarized backwards most of its life. But I think it's good enough that it would work. They talk all the time about sanding and filing points and stuff, but generally if they work, we don't really want to be readjusting and stuff for no reason.
You know, this is some super thick, tough paint on here, like 415 or something on the firewall here.
Can you pull that?
Well, I was just trying to get that off of there.
Say you can get that back,
It's
and we
not
can
lending itself to coming
give you a
off.
little disc. We can do this another way too, Jerry, which might be cleaner. If you want to just leave that paint on there, we can get a piece of wire and we can run up to your battery strap with a jumper.
Oh, absolutely.
Put a terminal behind it.
Absolutely.
Then we don't have to take off your corrosion control.
No, I like that idea.
Okay, I'll go get some terminals.
I may have brought that stuff with me. Here we go. 10 gauge. 10 gauge. Let's see, 5/16 on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
the
quarter
one.
inch stud.
Well, this is the one.
But
for
it'll
here.
have good-
This is
oh, I got you.
5/16
Sure,
there
sure.
On that end.
Super.
The other end, we need a.
You say your ammeter's not hooked up?
It's not hooked to anything.
Oh, it's just a
I-
bypass wire.
It's-
Just goes right by it. It's, yeah.
Well, when they did the conversion, they just skipped the. They decided to skip the
They skip,
ammeter.
did they skip all the gauges? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did skip all.
You know, and that's an interesting thing. We go back to, that I realized just recently with reading again these old auto books and stuff.
Looks like a quarter.
Yeah.
10 gauge. Yeah.
On the gauge panels, a lot of them had a voltage regulator in the 50s that went in with, it was either part of the fuel gauge or a standalone voltage regulator on a lot of vehicles. And you know what finally dawned on me? The reason they had those in the 50s was because they went to 12 volt. That regulator drops
Yes.
from 12 volts to 6 volts
Yes.
because they didn't want to change the gauge wiring.
Yes.
So, and that's something I found out as I was stumbling around with stuff. I'm like, that's what a lot of people do for conversion is they get the later regulator. I always thought that, the battery ain't close enough in voltage? I couldn't figure out why you needed a regulator for your fuel gauges, for your gauge panel. It didn't dawn on me until just recently that, oh, that's why.
So up in like Mustangs in the 60s, Ford still had the resistors in there because their instruments were still the old 6-volt stuff. Now, I looked under there, and there are these little resistors attached to the end of the wire where they would hook onto the gauge, but they're not connected. So they ran into some trouble. when
They
did
had
it.
some resistors and things even on the old 6-volt stuff, so.
These are new.
Oh,
New
I
looking.
see, I see. So and hooking just a resistor doesn't really do the same thing as having a voltage regulator. And really, in this day and
They
age,
sell an aftermarket
I was going to
device
say you
for
can go
that.
to an electronic voltage regulator that's not hard to deal with.
Yeah, they sell a nice aftermarket deal for that, which
And
I'm
if a
planning to
person's
use.
cheap, you can go to DigiKey and you can get just the electronic regulator itself without any box or anything for about $5.
Well, I'm going to support the guy who's making them and selling them.
I say that more for a fact of just generically when you need certain components, because I'm always buying generic electronic components. And one of the people you really do need to support in this industry is like the ones, especially with the Model A's and early Model B's, where they're pouring the Babbitt bearings and all of that, because they're doing it because they love it.
Right.
They ain't making anything.
Yeah.
They are not making
I've
money.
watched some videos on that, and it's pretty involved.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's surprisingly involved.
Yeah, no, I've poured Babbitt. Not for a vehicle because nobody can afford enough, but I've poured some for airplanes, old airplane engines. I've poured some for
Oh,
machinery.
really?
Things where it really mattered. But
So
as
you're
far
a
as
Babbitt pouring shop also. I'll keep that in mind.
no, don't remember that. That is.
Well, remember, I've got insert bearings.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. No, you're good. You're good. We're overpriced. We're overpriced for that. That's yeah. The guys that do it because they love it. And if there was a steady roll of it where you could really get set up and do a lot of it every day, but it's like me doing one every 5 years. It's nah.
Well, I think we're going to have a pretty good ground.
Yeah, pull your terminal off before we put our regulator back in, though.
Does this need to go on the... I put it over here.
It doesn't.
But it needs to go over here. It needs to go
It's
on this
better-
side.
better
It
on
needs to go
this.
on this side.
It should work on either, but it's better.
Yeah, let's put
Yeah,
it
no,
on.
this one's insulated. That one's isolated. It
Yeah,
ain't gonna work.
yeah.
No,
let's
it
put
has to be
yeah,
that way.
that's why I just...
Yeah, no, it has to
Luckily, I
be.
just thought of that before
Yeah.
it's too late. Okay.
Yeah, and another thing that could go bad with these is see where this resistor here, it looks all intact, but that
Well,
can
if
break.
If that was burnt up there,
Yeah,
yeah, I see
yeah,
what you mean.
that's your low charge, I think. Yeah, it's going to field. That's your low charge when the points are not engaged. Which, one of the things I was saying, we could hack it if we had to on some of this, and go out there and I just get a 10 watt, 10 ohm resistor, and we just put a separate one across there. The ones I've got are a little tight for space.
You got resistors in stock?
I
huh?
got all kinds of things, yes.
Yeah.
No, we do that. Because all of this out here, we do the wiring. All these different electricals and, yeah.
Well,
But let's
I
for
only do wiring if I have to.
safety, let's pull this back off first.
Now, we may have to polarize.
Nope. Nope, it should take off and work now.
Well, unless you disconnect the battery.
Oh, even if you disconnect the battery, it doesn't matter. What you're doing is you're making, the reason it works is to get the very first little start of power, it comes from a permanent magnetism that you make in the field iron, the iron that's in the field. It makes it into a very weak permanent magnet.
And it'll last for a while unless the
Yes.
battery was disconnected for 6 months. then you might have to redo it.
Even if the battery is connected for 6 months, you might have to redo it. There's just a time, and normally it's more like 2 years.
Oh, okay.
But there is a time where the magnetism will go away.
Yeah.
So yeah, to flash this one, what you would want to do is the same thing as far as flashing from the battery terminal to the armature. So you would need a wire.
Right. You don't have to disconnect anything. You just
Yeah,
Jumper.
because
You
the
just jumper.
regulator's already got some connection to ground, unless the regulator's burnt out, in which case the flashing is not going to do you any good. If the regulator, say that little resistor was burnt out back there,
right.
it's, well, you'd still, but your high charge points are still making contact, so now it should still flash. Because those are for low charge. Your high charge should be engaged when we're not putting out anything. So we need to hook,
Where are we at?
we can hook this one back up. I'll let you do
I'll
that.
get it.
And then I will hook on to the battery voltage, and we can have the camera and all of us look at the points and see if they should move, but also I want to have the voltmeter and watch it. And fire her up and give her a few pretty good revs. In fact, hold it at a higher rev for a bit. Oh, wait a second. How come I'm not getting voltage reading on the battery? Okay. Got 1277.
Clear.
Yep. Rev it up some more. Okay, I'm going to try just jumping it while it's here.
Sure.
Caught again. Okay, rev it up again, Jerry. A little more. Voltage really getting out. I'd try another regulator.
Well, that's kind of a question.
What regulator?
Use that regulator, or, I mean, they may just pick that one because it was cheap.
Yeah.
But you'd like to think that it worked at one time.
Well, you know what you have now, though, is you have a 3-brush generator for 12 volts.
So the 2-unit regulator makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that regulator is on Amazon for 32 bucks or something. So,
Buy another one, try it.
yeah, that is the next step.
Yeah.
Easy to do.
Yeah. And I got thinking about that, too. While they're jumping and whatever, just push down on the cutout. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
The book says to not do that, but yeah,
Oh.
I imagine most people do it anyway.
Oh, it said that's a way. It said that's the way some people polarize it, but don't do it. Is that what it said?
No, not to
Or-
polarize it, but
Oh.
to see if so that energizes the field coil, right?
Well, that energizes on this one. It energizes the armature output, and then
Okay.
and then because the other side we are believing is getting a good ground, it will also polarize the field.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the type A or B, internal or external grounded.
Yeah. Yeah, this is
And this
externally
is-
grounded.
And this is the third option with the third brush.
Externally grounded third brush, yes.
Externally grounded third brush. Yeah, I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, you could call it a fourth type too, because there's the ones where you have totally independent field with, we have four options really. We have both ends of the field open. We have the field connected inside to the battery, so it's externally grounded. We have the battery inside connected to ground, so we feed it battery to make the field get power. Or we have a third brush over here, and we ground it externally,
Yeah.
which is the fourth option.
Yeah. Well, I feel better about ordering a regulator now anyway.
It would be interesting to see, send me a link on that. Let me read through what it says. Well, you said it didn't have any specs at all. It just
I
showed
can
us.
send it to you, but there's very
Yeah.
little on there.
Because it would be interesting to see if what it is saying. It appeared like it was grounding the regulator, you know,
Right.
but
In the on the website, it lists a whole string of tractors that the regulator is for.
do they say they have third brushes?
No, it just says, you know, John Deere this or Oliver that or whatever.
I see. I would think that the same one for a non-third brush would work with the third brush, as long as it's a grounding, externally grounding type.
Right.
I would think that it still should regulate it okay.
Right.
The only thing we're really doing with the third brush that's different than if we hooked it directly to a battery inside of the generator is we are limiting the maximum.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as if it is just an externally grounded.
Right. So it's not a Ford style. Internally grounded Ford style. Unless you could say it's like an earlier Ford style with a third brush.
Yeah, it's like a 6-volt style, but made
Maybe it's a conversion.
set up. Yeah, that's what
Probably a earlier 6-volt
right.
frame converted to 12 volt.
That's
I bet
what I'm thinking it is.
yeah. It would have been nice if they would have put just a little info on there, like who did it or
And I
what it
looked
is.
at the current, the alternator ones. They don't do like they used to. The older ones used to look just like these, but the ones they're making now they'll bolt up the same, but they look a little different. The alternators that I see that fit in this case. So functionally
Right.
but they don't look the same.
Right.
They look like it's different, which I'm like, you know, it wouldn't take that much guys to just take a piece of old pipe and make it look the same.
They
But-
do make a expensive aftermarket one that has the barrel that looks like a generator, but you can tell the fins, the cooling fan for the alternator is sticking out the end, so you can still tell it's an alternator, but it fools part of the people.
And we wanted it all to work today, but, well, we did have it work some. It
Well, we'll
burned out a bulb.
feel like we did something. You'll be the first to know if that regulator works.
Yeah.
The new one. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.